Do you have a process at this point from now being in the space, pretty much as long as anybody has, um, where you hear about like a new NFT collection or something like that, and you're able to like look at it and analyze and decide if this is something that you think has potential?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of case by case because these are, again, all like different types of assets with different drivers. You can try to boil it down to like three pegs, like one being like social value, one being financial value, and one being utility value. Social value is very like evident, things like Bored Ape Yacht Club at the time, things like Pudgy Penguins right now. Like there's certainly a lot of social value. Financial value is kind of like the unspoken part of the equation where like nobody really wanted to talk about any financial value given regulatory uncertainty at the time. But you could kind of like back into it, through hints of like, oh, like Bored Ape dropped the ape token and people did the math on like the rate of return, but you also got mutant ape vials. You also got like free pieces of other side land, and you got these like little experiences along the way. You're seeing Pudgy do it right now. I think between now and maybe by the time this is posted, their token Pengu is going to go live, and people are already doing the math. The pre-market's trading at $5 billion market cap. Like that is a financial asset that just acts as a pass-through to some other asset.
Hopefully by now you know me. My name is Lawrence Linker. I'm an executive entrepreneur and investor in crypto. When I first joined the industry a little over 4 years ago, I had a lot to learn, and I found that I learned best by just talking to people active in the industry with specific areas of expertise. The Coinversations podcast is my invitation to you to join me in these conversations so that we can both continue learning. Of course, nothing said by me or any of my guests is financial advice, and you must do your own research before making any investment decisions. Today, I'm going to be talking to Sasha Fleyshman. Sasha is a portfolio manager at Arca, focused on identifying niche growth sectors within the digital asset ecosystem. Sasha has over 7 years of experience, including a wealth of knowledge and background in NFTs, and is responsible for the management of the Arca NFT Fund 1. Sasha is a super interesting, super intelligent young crypto wunderkind, and we had a great conversation today talking about the origins and evolution of the NFT sector as a potential investment space. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoy having it. Sasha, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, Sasha, I thought we would get started by hearing a little bit about yourself and how you got started in crypto.
Absolutely. This was back in late 2016. I was still in college, pre-med. That's why my Twitter handle is Arca Chemist. I have a Chem BS, and kind of just by happenstance, was sent over the Bitcoin white paper, gave it a read, found out that, I didn't really know what being a libertarian was, but it was something that was probably most aligned to how I felt, given that I've never opened a brokerage account, never, trade equities, didn't believe in equities or the traditional system. And something like a Bitcoin white paper spoke to me. Didn't have a lot of money. I was living the college lifestyle, living in the garage of a house, and took what I had and threw it in. Obviously, the move from 20, call it like December 2016 through the bull market in 2017 was a bit eye-opening. That little money that I put in then became quite notable relative to my lifestyle at the time. And as things financially grow, the appetite to learn grows. I spent a lot more time skipping parties, skipping school, skipping everything, and just, being heads down, learning about the burgeoning ICO space, the intricacies of actually trading these assets, the differences between um, centralized exchanges and the early forms of DEXs with like IDEX, and then just kind of growing from there and just, natural curiosity.
So, was it some early wins in terms of investing in a space that made you say, "Hey, this is something I really need to pay attention to"?
In the beginning, not really so much. I wasn't exactly, this was before I really had the concept of what like the return profile for this was. Again, as a chemist, no financial background, no macro or microeconomics classes. I wasn't really thinking of like return profile. It was more so for better or for worse, like my middle finger to the existing system. Again,
Interesting.
I think I tossed in like $800, $400 to Bitcoin, $400 to ETH. It wasn't notionally sizable enough for me to look at it every day like an investment. It was more so a premise or an ethos that I agreed with. And then as it became a bigger number, I had to kind of force feed myself, recursively figure out why this matters, why I should hold on to it or let it go. And, from there kind of became a bit radicalized with the space itself.
Interesting. Yeah, Arthur Hayes talks about this a lot. We had him on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he speaks often about how the traditional financial world doesn't quite understand how much crypto investing appeals to a certain group of people who are really interested in the space for like a counterculture kind of for counterculture reasons. And there's been some interesting articles recently that have come out about, like a counter elite forming that really rejects the traditional financial system and really wants to figure out how to make crypto and blockchain the primary financial system, at least for them. So it sounds like you're kind of in that category. So okay, so you started really learning a lot about it. Maybe explain to me how you got from there to being NFT fund manager at Arca.
Yeah, it's a long history. Let me try to condense it a bit. Um,
Yeah.
Part of the, I guess, early 2017
We have time.
education.
We have time, by the way. We're not 4 hours like Joe Rogan, but you can tell us the long story.
Absolutely. Part of the education was realizing that, there was more than what was being shown at Coinbase at the time. Primarily it was Bitcoin, ETH, and Litecoin. This was before Bitcoin Cash came out and some of the others. So, Litecoin at the time didn't make quite too much sense to me. Bitcoin and ETH were pretty separate in ideals. So threw into both there. And then as the ICO space grew, found out there was, an order of magnitude more assets to be had. Spent a lot of time looking through those. Inevitably, like anyone does when they first find something new, thought I was pretty good at this and, whipped up a Bittrex account pretty quickly. Bittrex at the time was like the leading altcoin exchange. Spent a lot of time scouring white papers, looking into, various niche products being launched. Spent a lot of time on like OPSEC and reading into wallet infrastructure. Again, I'm not very tech heavy either, so chemists trying to figure out what SHA-256 is, what private key, public key splinters are. And, as time grew, just by virtue of spending all of my time in this space, kind of caught up to speed. It helped that, the ICO era just began. So I wasn't, decades behind
Sure.
like I
Yeah.
felt in chemistry. I spent my whole career just trying to figure out like if I can make a dent of an impact in the chemical field as opposed to joining this new asset class. So spent a lot of time, for better or for worse, ran up a pretty good number in 2017. Didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't exactly have like strong risk parameters or like a central thesis around it all, which inevitably leads to giving a lot of it back in 2018. But the point being was that spent a lot of time educating on what the space had to offer, however rudimentary or just pie in the sky potential. And, started writing some pieces. I think it was Medium at the time, just writing odds and ends here. I remember I was asked to write about BitConnect at the time, which was the ever ratcheting now Ponzi scheme. And, actually went back and read that report that I wrote, basically saying it was going to collapse. Not my best report I've ever created, but it was, nice to see the trajectory. So just trying to get my hands dirty everywhere. And then fast forward to 2018, Arca was first starting up. They reached out. Still to this day, I don't know if it was because of like my blog posts or because of just my involvement in the space, going to all the meetups in, Las Vegas, San Francisco, LA. But somehow my name got tossed in the ring. I met them actually during spring break of my junior year in college. Ended up working there over the summer as Arca was first being spun up, and then joined full time the following year on graduation. So that's how I got involved in Arca from there. Kind of wore a bunch of hats, Swiss Army knifed my way around. The
Hmm.
space was still young. There wasn't exactly this big um,
What were they
over.
initially approaching you about? What did they say? Hey man, you see, what do they want with you?
I think it just, starting a new asset manager and getting some crypto-minded folks. I was very well and clear to them at the time that my financial skills were probably bottom of the barrel, but my crypto native skills were decent to strong, and definitely was tapped into the happenings of the space. So it was kind of a mutualistic relationship at first where they needed, I guess, I don't want to call myself a grunt, but someone like, on the ground
Yeah,
getting my feet dirty, just trying to figure out what's going on in the space. And they offered to help teach me like the business aspect of running assets in the
sure.
meantime.
Which is something that they know a little bit about. So, you know what? We're going to take a quick second to get a word from our sponsor, and then I think it might be helpful to just talk for those that may not know about the history of Arca. Ready for a real bank alternative using crypto rails? Meet Cast, the ultimate card to spend stablecoins and soon crypto at over 150 million merchants. Available to over 100 countries, it takes just 3 minutes to set up. Top up using USDT, USDC, or USDE from supported networks like Solana, Tron, Ethereum, Polygon, and more. Start spending instantly using Apple or Google Pay. Splitting a bill? Send money through WhatsApp or Telegram. Need to get paid? Get a virtual USD account and receive funds in your Cast account as USD stablecoins. Cast is the first true bank alternative for the globally mobile crypto economy and remote workers. Premium metal cards or Solana cards earn up to 12% in points, and Coinversations listeners get $10 in USDT for your next coffee on Cast. Just download the app using the link in the show notes. Yeah, so Arca is a fund that I think a lot of people have heard of, but maybe don't necessarily make the connection in the crypto space, which is that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the basically Arca was created by people from Wisdom Tree Capital.
Our CEO, Rain Steinberg, was ex-Wisdom Tree, correct?
Right. That so which and you guys really invented the why am I blanking? The ETF.
Well, I wasn't a part of it. As far as I know, Wisdom
Yeah,
Tree,
the rain
Tree
and
helped
the
author.
yeah. Because I noticed that when I look at my brokerage account to this day for the SP 500 ETF that I'm in, I see Arca on there. Is that
So I think that's a misnomer or like a false
oh
equivalency. There's an Arca NYC. That's not us.
and it's not connected to you guys at all.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, all right, okay. But okay, but so basically Rain Steinberg, co-founder of Wisdom Tree, is that correct?
I believe so. But again, not
Yeah.
my
And
say.
then said, okay, we got to do something in this digital asset space. And then picked you as to be like a grunt, man on the ground who really understood the space. How did you go from being a grunt to being the guy that like you're gonna make decisions, multi-million dollar decisions on where to allocate capital?
Yeah. When Arca was first started, we were a very skinny team, as most new asset managers are. So, starting out, wore many hats, was our analyst at the time, also our execution trader. Also worked on some research to try to get the team caught up to speed on like the current existing landscape. Again, we launched like straight into the bear market, so there was a lot of time to really get a scope of things. Price action wasn't exactly too fruitful. From there, found out I had a knack for trading with help from Jeff, who's our CIO, kind of taught me like, healthy guardrails that he learned over his time in at Wall Street. Try to combine that with crypto. Not everything is synchronous, but try to take lessons where I could and really kind of built it up a liking to trading. So moved from being, I guess, an analyst to our trader in 2019 and did that primarily from 2019 through most of 21, operating as our head trader at times. In March of 2020, the onset of COVID, at the time still young enough, still have the itch enough where I was trading probably 18 hours a day. Pretty
Mm,
much woke up, had some food maybe, and just traded from, the time I was awake till the time I decided to go to bed. And that was kind of the MO for almost 18 months, especially in a time where Asia flows dominated. My typical day, I would wake up at like 11 a.m., start work at noon, and usually work till like 4 or 5 in the morning. And
mm.
again, not all of that was high octane. There are some like down periods where I can catch a breath or do whatever, but pretty much being on screens for the entirety of COVID was the name of the game. And through that, I also kind of took the esoteric stuff. So not only was I trading, but I'd also take the hot potato for anything that was off the run that didn't really fit a sector. And around that time is when we found Axie Infinity, which was
Mm.
the first popularized Web3 game. And it was kind of my job to DD it as alongside our head of research. And in doing so, as a career gamer, I really really liked the premise of owning your assets in game. Ended up pitching it to the fund. We ended up writing a small check. I also jumped into the digital assets themselves. I bought some Axie land and some Axies themselves. And as the space grew and as Axie grew, as we all know in 2020, 2021, that position grew as well as the NFTs within that space grew. And it just coincided at a perfect time to, get me into the NFT space. I call Axie my Trojan horse into the rest of the NFT economy.
Interesting. Okay. I think that's not probably not the entry point for a lot of people who are super into NFTs. But that's a cool way to do it. And just a tip for those people that may be watching this thinking like, wow, how can I find success in crypto trading? You've heard it here, guys. It's easy. You just work 18 hours a day for 18 months and you'll get some wins. So anybody can do it. So okay, so talk to me about so in Axie Infinity, which I think is a brilliant and most people acknowledge was a brilliant application of blockchain technology. It's like a Pokemon style monster battle game where your creatures that you're fighting are represented by NFTs. And so they have all the sort of tradability kind of features of NFTs. Um, and this is new because typically in games you can't take it off platform, right? Like it's not like I can find, yeah. So how did that inspire you to take a closer look at the potential of what NFTs could be and do?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just time and place. At the time when I went after the Axies themselves and the digital land, it was very game centric and not very asset class centric. I just grew up playing RuneScape, Diablo, games of that cloth, and have burned a few PayPal accounts in my day. Kind of dropping assets, hoping someone would PayPal you $5, and then hoping that they wouldn't, report it as fraud and nuke
Hmm.
your. But back in the day, that's how I used to buy, video games. It's kind of hard to go to your parents and say, "Hey, please buy me a $60 game every 2 weeks." So a lot of it was
Hmm.
just sweat equity and finding Axie. That was the very first principle. Like as a gamer, I grew up in the, Blizzard forums and like working through and like actually operating in these micro economies. And that was like the first aha moment for the gaming sector for me, which was you can own the assets in the game. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Like you said, you could take it off platform. You could, but like where to, right? It was still very primitive. So like if I took my land off, where am I going to go with it? It was more so about the fact that my sweat equity and time that I'm putting into this game is represented by assets that I own as a part of the network as a whole. And from there, discovered that these things are actually called NFTs. NFT was just kind of a colloquial term at the time, just any asset that has no, direct counterpart somewhere else. And around that time, the actual PFP part of NFTs were kicking up again as COVID was starting. You had collectibles at large growing. Sneakerheads were, going bananas with these new drops. You had sports trading cards going crazy. And this kind of all like happened at the same time, right around the stimulus package where everyone decided like, hey, money doesn't mean anything right now. Nihilism kind of kicked in, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
was all about scarcity and owning something that someone else can't have and flexing it. Again, everyone was on lockdown, so internet flexing was much more um, popular than real life. Nobody cared about buying the Rolex all of a sudden because you can't see a Rolex from 300 miles away. But what you can see is the picture of something that somebody owns. So it kind of blew up. I remember my first mint. Um, Actually, it was either Hash Masks or Justin Mahler's art project. I think it was Hash Masks in January of 2020, and then Justin Mahler was actually on my birthday when they minted it in February. And neither of them exactly are anything to write home about from like a P&L perspective, but they were both very interesting, like first forays into each sector, one being like PFP, like addition to art, and one being one of one auctioned off art pieces. And it was just a very interesting dynamic of like an open auction for these assets that, are partially RNG. You didn't exactly know what hash mask traits you were getting up front. They had like this bonding curve, and you get the reveal later. And then for the art, it was just, do you want to own the open edition for cheap, or do you want to buy the 1 out of 10 for more, or the 1 out of 1? And it just reminded me a lot of the card space where you could buy like the base Luka Doncic card, or you could buy like the special 1 of 1 logo man, and that significantly increases the price. And so it wasn't fully formed at that point, but from there, the whole space kind of just ballooned to a level that looking back is just absurd. But I think 99% of these new asset classes is just like luck surface area, right? Like I wasn't exactly the smartest on art. In fact, I would argue I don't know very much about art. I'm not an art guy. But all I did was just spend every day in the ecosystem, pay attention, be around, and kind of work symbiotically with the other, call it 5,000 people that even knew what was going on at the time, and kind of I don't like to call it leeching, but maybe leech a little bit on like their expertise, and
Absorb.
yeah, just learn by attrition, and just spend a lot of time in the space. And it kind of happened with or without me, and I just happened to be along for the ride. And same thing with Bitcoin and ETH. As it became more financially impactful, you say, okay, I need to drop everything and like spend some time doing this.
And do you have a process at this point from now being in the space, pretty much as long as anybody has, um, where you hear about like a new NFT collection or something like that, and you're able to like look at it and analyze and decide if this is something that you think has potential?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of case by case because these are again all like different types of assets with different drivers. You can try to boil it down to like three pegs, like one being like social value, one being financial value, and one being utility value. Social value is very like evident, things like Bored Ape Yacht Club at the time, things like Pudgy Penguins right now. Like there's certainly a lot of social value, right? Like you can join the huddle for Pudgies, or you could be part of the yacht club for apes. And like at the time, that was like an appeal to authority. You used to have like these big accounts come in late stage of the bull market and buy Bored Apes just so that their threads would get more engagement. So it became like this kind of like taxi medallion exclusive club. That's certainly a social value aspect. Financial value is kind of like the unspoken part of the equation where like nobody really wanted to talk about any financial value given regulatory uncertainty at the time. But you could kind of like back into it, through hints of like, oh, like Bored Ape dropped the ape token, and people did the math on like the rate of return. But you also got mutant ape vials. You also got like free pieces of other side land, and you got these like little experiences along the way. You're seeing Pudgy do it right now. I think between now and maybe by the time this is posted, their token Pengu is going to go live, and people are already doing the math. The pre-market's trading at $5 billion market cap. Like that is a financial asset that just acts as a pass-through to some other asset. You have things like what Parallel's doing with their Prime assets. You could have bought the Prime keys and some of those asset-bearing NFTs, and that would have yielded you the Prime token, which at that point wasn't live. So there are ways to look at financial value. And then the last value, utility value, That's really like dependent on what type of ecosystem it is, right? It could be exclusive access to new drops if it's like an art project. It could be like integration into certain applications if they were like PFPs. The premise at the time was that the metaverse was going to be this big world-eating type of application, so much so that a Fang, changed their name to Meta. Obviously, cart before the horse a little bit now that we can hindsight capital the whole thing. But the premise itself is very real in the sense that, you look at the last 20 years, everything that we've done is now being moved to a digital format, right? Everyone now gets their news online. Everyone now pays online, communicates online. Like the world is moving online. And the last, I guess, I don't want to call it the final frontier, but the last big move is taking assets and moving them online. And there's two ways to do that. You can either transfer assets over online, things like RWAs, like real estate or some sort of real world asset that has a digital representation, or you can go the route of creation, right? What happened with the NFT cycle is more so asset creation, making new assets that are digital focused. And those utilities at that time were very like few and far between and very isolated. And I would argue even to this day, it's very segmented. But the whole point, I think, of the NFT bull market of 2020 and the year after was more so a proof of concept that like the rails themselves worked. Like people focus too much on, oh, the Bored Ape maybe doesn't look so good up front. I don't like how it looks. I don't like the art style. That wasn't the point of what NFTs were. The front is just like your hook to keep you there. And oh, like these are different. What really matters is like the back end of like, what they're doing. You can own this piece of an ecosystem that cannot be replicated by anybody else. It's a unique identifier, right? Identifiers are different than identity, right? Identity is who you are, and identifiers point to your identity. So like your
Mm,
on-chain identifiers help like format who you are in the virtual world. And people would then own these assets that have stark differences on the back end, and nobody focused on that. So when you look at like bored apes, right? What's the difference between a bored ape and a mutant ape? The difference that people say is, oh, one looks like it, had a Marvel-esque like chemical spill, and the other one looks like a monkey, or an ape, I guess. But the reality is that when you had these financial value accruals, like the ape token or other side, the mutant apes and the bored apes got different values, and those
mm,
values weren't always based on the traits on the front end. It was also based on like what collection they were a part of on the back end. Sometimes it was based on the length of holding the asset, so the provenance of the actual asset itself. Sometimes it was based on the interaction, right? If that wallet that the asset's attached to has done certain things, then it acts as a qualifier. So in
mm.
essence, like that's where it was, but the I think the vision kind of fell short. I think as it got bigger, people started raising venture rounds, and now all of a sudden you've tied some sort of valuation to the whole thing, and then people turn this into a horizontal IP, like a accrual game, right? Like I think a big um, almost misstep that Bored Ape did was toward the end of the cycle, they started pushing for metaverse-based gaming, right? And if you
Hmm.
think about the inception of Bored Ape to what it became, a metaverse was never part of Bored Ape's vision, as far as I know. And a game was certainly never a part of it. It just got big enough and raised venture dollars and decided we need to find ways to make this a sustainable business that has, ARPU, that has MRR.
Hmm.
How are we going to figure out how to back into the valuation that we just raised? And I think it kind of forced people to do things that maybe they look back at now and kind of feel like they were kind of pressured into doing something that wasn't the best for the long term.
Yeah, maybe some short-sighted decisions. Interesting. Yeah, that's a great history. Tell me, tell me where are we at in the NFT uh cycle now? Because a few years back, NFTs were all the rage, and you couldn't grab a good one fast enough, right? Like it felt like from the moment you thought about like, oh, maybe I'll get a CryptoPunk, maybe I'll get a Bored Ape, and you take a couple days to like mull it over, and by the time you look back at it, it had doubled in price.
Mhm.
And now or up until recently, it really looked almost like it was gonna go away. Like the value of so many of these collections went down so much that I think there was a question of whether, hey, maybe NFTs were just something for that time, and a few hardcore diehard loyalists will hold on to their NFTs to the end. But maybe that whole experiment, just kind of didn't work out. And from my casual observer perspective, it does look like we're starting to see a little bit of a reversal on that. Love to hear from you what your view is on kind of where we are and where things are going.
Yeah. So, fact of the matter, of the NFTs released in the last cycle, 90% are probably done for good. And that's fine. That's kind of a normal process of a emerging market that kind of hyperinflates in supply. If you look at like the base principle, outside of the ones that meet the financial value prong of the, I guess, due diligence, social and utility value is very subjective, right? And when you look at these NFTs, for the most part, they are culture assets or like on-chain like wealth effect assets. So it's always been the opinion, at least on our side, that um, these are late cycle participants. We didn't expect them to outperform at like the first vestiges of a bull market. More so, we kind of think that they will play like a catch-up role towards the end, right? As
Mm,
people start to accrue wealth and start to have like looser purse strings, they'll start to go for those on-chain column flexes or on-chain, identifiers. And so I'm actually, for anything, I'm a bit surprised it's happening so soon. I
mm,
would have thought it would be like 6 to 12 months down the line. But this was always the base case for us. Like NFTs are certainly not dead. If most of them go away, like not only is that okay, I think it's actually healthy. But the ones that survive obviously have a head start in terms of like provenance and staying power. But again, NFTs are like there's a difference between the tech that powered it and the assets that were produced, right? If you look at blockchain, and I know Bitcoin maximalists are not going to love this, but if you look at like the applications of blockchain on like the ETH side, the first iterations weren't exactly too good. You can name a few from the 2017 era that maintained relevancy. A lot of people refer to them as the dinosaur coins now. I don't know if that's
mhm,
a positive connotation,
mhm,
but
mhm,
the point is that some survived. But if you look at the applications of like blockchain tech now, right, through ETH, through Solana, through these other chains, we are miles away from what we had in 2017. And I think that's what you're going to see from the NFT side, right? I don't know if we're just going to keep rinsing and repeating the cycle of like six-figure chauvinist assets. But what I do think is going to happen is that the ability to make assets that are non-transfer or non-interchangeable and unique within a bigger subset, I think has very, very broad and valuable applications in this space. And
mhm,
for the most part, things like RWAs, I'm not too sure how that works as a sector without the ERC standards and the Solana equivalents for these types of assets. And you look at what's been happening slowly, like a good example of an NFT that's being used everywhere. Uniswap L positions are now represented as NFTs, right? That's not
mm,
as sexy. It's not. You're not going to make your uni LP position your profile picture, but it's an NFT. It's a non-fungible asset. Your LP position is unique to everybody else's in the pool. And if there's a world where we think we're going to start bringing real estate on chain, you're seeing people bring like collectibles on chain, like Rolex watches, sports cards, stuff like that. How are you going to do that in a fungible manner, right? You can create like perpetuals that are like paired against it loosely, but that's kind of a Rube Goldberg machine of getting to the source. And I think what NFTs offer is a source entry to these assets that are non-interchangeable. And
mm.
that as a technology, I think is going to outlive whatever timeline anyone thinks. And I
Yeah,
to be honest, I don't care if it's called NFTs or ABCs. Like the terminology doesn't matter so much as the premise. And the premise is, I think, is here to stay.
that makes a lot of sense. So let me clarify with you then, because I guess when I heard that you're, like NFT investor at Arca, I assumed that your work is basically deciding like how many pudgy penguins to trade for how many bored apes. But it sounds like you're actually looking at the whole tech, uh uh anything in it that's non-fungible, any non-fungible token in a much broader sense. Is that right?
Yeah, I would argue even one step beyond that. The NFT fund, I think, maybe sometimes catches like um, a wrong interpretation from the crowd. We're a hybrid vehicle, so we invest in NFTs, liquid assets, and venture assets across the stack. And the only parameters that we have is that we stick within the ecosystems that we define, which is Web3 and the surrounding infrastructure, consumer applications, NFTs, and their surrounding tech. That's where we
Mm,
make our meat and potatoes. So in the fund, yes, we do carry NFTs directly. We also carry fungible assets related to NFTs. We also
got
carry
it.
venture equity and SaaS for these projects that are building the space. So when being called NFT fund doesn't necessarily limit us to only buying non-fungible tokens. We buy anything and invest in anything that we think will positively correlate to the growth of that industry.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful to understand. And how has performance been?
Can't speak to it, but I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, that's great. Why can't you speak to it? Is it not public?
It's a private fund. It's a closed-end fund.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, but I've heard through the grapevine that performance is pretty good. So I'll throw that out there as well. Um, if what advice would you have for new investors coming into the space that want to get into NFTs? And it seems to me also that yeah, I'm not sure where it stands now, but a few years back, it seemed to me that NFTs opened up the marketplace to there was a type of investor that came on board that was really interested in like just NFTs. Like they didn't want to do other stuff. And they were kind of their own thing. I haven't seen like direct like demographic data on these people, but it seems that demographically they were different than traditional crypto investors as well. They were kind of really their own thing. If anybody has data on this, hit me up. Um, Somebody new coming on board now, they say, "Look, I want to get into NFTs. What advice do you have for them?"
Probably the same stock advice I have for people that are first like entering crypto in general, which is, I learned a very hard lesson Thanksgiving of 2017. Super excited about the crypto space. Obviously, I was sitting on some gains from, the bull market of 17, went straight to my family Thanksgiving and, tried to convert as many family members as I could. Managed to get a few of them over. They had give or take 30 to 60 days of fun and then a year and a half of pain, which I
Yeah.
felt, re responsible for. I found that a doing something like that, telling people to buy or to allocate, it kind of puts you in a lose-lose situation where their gains are their win and their losses are your fault. And so
Yeah.
I also think it's a bad setup for long-term conviction. So what I tell people, there's crypto curious all around, especially you work in this space long enough, you get tagged as the crypto guy. All my other hobbies are down the toilet. I am only crypto to the rest of the world. And so I get these questions and they're very cyclical. And what I tell people is I don't care if you buy it or sell it, but I think it would be an unwise decision to not educate on it. I'm totally okay with the person that looks into Bitcoin or looks into NFTs and says, you know what, not for me, not my type of investment. Because at the end of the day, they're going to put their money to work and it's their risk to bear, right? So I'm not going to talk to them once a week and tell them how I feel weekly. What I want them to do is say that they spent the time on it. So if and when it becomes a much bigger thing, they can't say, "Oh, I wish I knew about it because I would have done it." Right? That's the story you hear from everybody. "Oh, I wish I heard about Bitcoin in 2012. I would be so rich." It's like I'm not so sure, right? Like you can't. So if I bought Bitcoin in 2012, who knows how if I would have held it all the way to now?
Yeah,
Probably not.
most people would not have, right?
Yeah.
And everybody says that, but yeah.
Asset ownership is conviction based, right? Like the Bitcoin that I bought in 2016, I still have. And it's because for me, there's probably not a dollar price point that I want out. The only time I would sell is if I need it for something else and I'm willing to, call it a day. But I wasn't doing it to make money, right? I was doing it because I believed in it. And sometimes those things are correlated. But more so I want people to draw their own conclusions. And I think as a space, the big thing we can do is make sure that information and like education is more like readily available. I could tell you that when I joined the space, it was both easy and very hard. It was easy in the sense that there wasn't so much noise because there wasn't so many participants, but it was hard in the sense that like most of my research came from Reddit, from like forum blogs, from YouTube videos, and at this point it's so saturated that you send 10 people out to go educate for themselves and maybe two get the right, what I would call like the right like baseline information. And so like uneducating people to then re-educate them is much harder.
Mm.
So I think as a space, like I don't know who does it. I wish I had the time in the world to make like a whole like intro 101 to digital assets. I'm sure there are people that do it and do a good job, but just having resources for people to get up to like even like a fifth grade level in crypto terms would be super helpful because how are you, how are you expecting people to join into what we consider to be like not only a financial asset class, but like a cultural movement without them fully understanding what's going on? That's how you get, revolving door participants. And in my opinion, those participants usually enter late into the cycle, usually get burned, and
Yeah,
that's their first impression of our space. And
sure.
it's much
Because
harder to read them.
yeah, because their conviction is so low, right? I have to throw in a plug right there because the company I founded, XD Academy, was built to create that reliable crypto education you're talking about. We just got acquired by a New York Stock Exchange listed international education group called Genius Group, and we may be building more of this type of stuff. So please watch this space and check us out. I find myself wondering now, like, you say that you make these comments about like the conviction, hold conviction, there's no price at which you would get out of your Bitcoin. And how do you sort of manage that with then running a fund? Because that's fine for your own personal, investment decisions. But if you're running a fund, people, your investors presumably have specific, return profiles that they're looking for, probably a certain time horizon. They may not be in it. They might be just in it for the money, and I assume that's okay, right? Like, how do you then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the difference is, I think the answer is in the question, right? Like the funds themselves carry parameters, right? So a closed-end fund usually has like a time duration of when you can invest, when you can recycle capital, when you can distribute capital. A hedge fund is kind of, evergreen, but carries, risk mandates and returns. Some people have a gate for pulling money out, some people don't, but they all have parameters of like what the fund is supposed to do, right? And you need to stick to those parameters. That's what you sold the vision on. For my personal assets, I'm the judge, jury, and executioner of how I manage my own finances. So, I could have a thesis today and wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to change my mind. And maybe
Mhm.
it doesn't work out, maybe it does, but it's my choice because I'm managing proprietary capital. When you're taking outside capital, you usually have a mandate, and that mandate defines the rules of the road of how you operate, and you just have to make sure that you don't conflate the two. And I think that's a big problem for a lot of people in the space that work on the buy side is that you spend all of your time in this space. Inevitably, you are going to carry some personal risk in this space. I don't think I've met anyone yet that hasn't at some point. And making sure that you can put into boxes how you view your own finances versus how you view a product in your company and your fund itself. And I think they're very separate things, and not mixing ideals is helpful, right? Like my crypto vision, my Bitcoin holdings are a lifelong investment, right? That has no capital draw, has no investor letters or LP calls, right? I'm my own CIO, so I can handle it by myself.
Yeah, very cool. All right, Sasha, this has been a great conversation. Before we wrap up, obviously nothing we're saying here today is financial advice, but it would be great to hear from you if you have any ideas on things that might be coming up in the NFT space in the next, maybe 6 months or so that you're really excited about that you think people should be paying attention to.
Yeah. We're seeing a big move in, what is defined as like the AI subclass of this space. At first, it was kind of dubbed like meme coins. They weren't exactly um, like big broad visions, and very quickly it morphed into like agents and platforms, and these agents are autonomously dropping their own collections, and who knows what those collections do. So I'm not sure where the puck goes there, but it's certainly something to watch. I'm going to beat the drum that I've been beating for years. I think that NFT assets and gaming are the most um,
Mm,
directly like mutually beneficial asset pairings that I can find anywhere. I think non-fungible assets go perfectly with gaming. I know gaming in the Web3 space has had a long road. 3 to 5 year production cycles mixed with billions of dollars of capital injected with minimal product return is definitely kind of the butt of the many jokes in our space. But I think that gaming is not only here to stay, but one of the best applications of blockchain asset-based products. Um, and so I'm very, very excited for what's to come from there. I think it's going to be a big year next year for that space as a whole. And then
yeah,
from there, just watching which of the assets are kind of minted as like the blue chip assets in our space.
mm. Yeah, I have to say I totally agree about the gaming. It's always made sense to me because as a gamer myself, um, like I am unmonetizable for most of the games that I play. Like I play Fortnite, I play Marvel Snap on my phone. I play well, I don't play as much anymore. What was the one the gun team-based battle royale? Uh, Apex
Apex.
Legends. Yeah. I was playing a lot of Apex at one point, and of course they're always like trying to get you to buy these skins and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not gonna pay money for a skin. Now, if it was mine, I would do it. So I always think that these guys must be leaving a ton of money on the table by not allowing me to keep my skin. And why do you suppose that these because the strategy from what we see so far is there's a lot of like crypto people now building games and they're raising tons of money to build games. Why haven't one of these like AAA game studios released a game with NFT capabilities built in?
I think a lot of it stems from, you know, they're incumbents, right? And they have like the big ones have a proven business model, right? I've been
Mm,
playing League of Legends since 2015. They could do this at any point. They could retroactively do it and turn the faucet on. But when you control, first party sales of assets and you make them non-transferable, in their vantage point, like they can control the flow of assets in their own space.
hmm
But certainly some games have done it. I mean, whether it's NFT localized or not, like Counter-Strike and Valve's marketplace, like you can trade skins on Counter-Strike today. It's a huge market.
mm,
It's certainly available. It's just not mainstream. And then I would say the other reason is like we as a space have yet to give them any reason to do so, right? Axie was a massive, massive, massive surprise out of left field for the traditional gaming space, but that was like a one touch point occurrence, right? If they start to see, in 2025 that 4, 5, 6, 10 games come out that are all proving successful business models using these assets, you're certainly going to get the attention of these people. The main things that you're watching is like the early instances of games that are doing this, their ARPU numbers are like 5 to 10x higher than traditional numbers. And a lot of that stems from the fact that retail and crypto is not equivalent to retail in the meat space of the real world, right?
hmm
Like we will casually drop 20 to $50 on some small asset in our space. The ARPU for some of these games are $7 to $10. And like
hmm
so the order of magnitude difference in spending habits when you know that you have some redeemable value, it's
It's
just
gonna
it's
be
just absurd.
yeah, for sure. And then it just it makes sense, right? Like I would personally, I'm sure I'd spend $1,000 on a Fortnite skin if I knew I could sell it, right? If I knew there was a marketplace for it, I'd be so
Yeah.
proud to like walk around and have people know, like, damn, this dude, that's $1,000. You know what I mean? I'm just not gonna do it if it's just going straight to the owner of the game. There's nothing I can do with it, you know? So
You
very
just you
interested.
define you just defined your social value and your utility value for that asset. You can go tell people and you can use it in the game. It's right
Yeah,
there.
it's right there.
It's
I
really
don't know
cool.
why it just makes no sense to me that they're not capitalizing on this. Have you heard the rumors that GTA 6 has crypto integration?
I have my best guess. I'm not like, digging into the weeds on this one. My best guess is that it's payments related and not assets
Yeah.
related.
Okay. Probably yeah.
Look, any step to me, like crypto gaming or Web3 gaming was a dirty word for the last 5 years, right? Traditional gamers look at us as pay to win. Our products weren't, everyone was calling themselves AAA, but like reality, first of all, AAA has qualifiers. Like it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a rubric, and we didn't really meet that rubric. So everyone
No.
calling themselves AAA was, drawing the ire of the rest of the space. I think the gap is quickly closing on product viability. I wouldn't say we're there yet, but we're very quickly getting there. And I think that remaining gap can be covered by what we're talking about, right? People are okay with a slightly less, UX, UI, like beautiful graphics product if they get the benefit of asset ownership and real like evangelist based synergies between the user and the game itself. So
Yeah.
I think we're closer than the space
Yeah.
gives credit
I th
for, but this space is always a very hyperbolic ramp.
yeah.
So we'll
I
see.
think to be fair to say, would you I think nobody would have played Axie if it wasn't a blockchain game. Is that fair to say?
I mean, when I played it, it was fun. I like the vision of what they were trying to do. There were times where it got like a bit like redundant. Then again, like you have to understand like there's different types of players, like different strokes for different folks. I'm more of
Sure.
like a mobile player or a shooter. This was more like a strategy auto battler. But yes, it got a bit stale over time. But I think the bigger premise is they hit a lot of things right, and they're still actively today. Like I watch what they're doing. They're very actively iterating and trying to make it better every day. And I think that's all that really matters. I looked at League of Legends, when it first came out. It was before I ever played it. But
Yeah.
compare League in its first year to League today. I mean, League today has five different game modes, has a TV show, has lore. Like the League back then, it reminds me a bit of StarCraft. It was very like a step above like 8-bit style graphics.
Yeah.
So it's all about long distribution. Can you get people, retain them, and evangelize them? Because then they're going to be much more lenient with your bumps and bruises along the way.
Fair enough. Sasha, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care, Sasha.